Jimmy Davidson, welcome to Run a Profitable Gym.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, it's been a while. So what we're going to start with today, before we get into your parkour story and your parkour gyms and what Motion Mentors is what the hell's parkour?
Yeah, so parkour is a type of martial art, but instead of fighting, it's a martial art of movement. So you would see athletes learning how to climb over walls, vault over obstacles, land safely, roll. Basically, a parkour athlete can go in pretty much any direction from where they're starting from quickly, efficiently, and safely. And it specifically is tailored to what you would find out in the, real life outdoor environment. That way it's practical and useful. And that's why it's also a martial art.
I've never heard it called a martial art before. That's really cool. Now, did parkour have its origins in free running, or do I have those two reversed?
Parkour came first, and then free running came later on when, this dude named Sebastian Foucan, who was part of the original founders of parkour coming out of Paris. When flips and more acrobatic, less efficient things started being added, free running was coined just to sort of be, an inclusive term for that. That way it wasn't just strictly like you have to train like a martial artist, you have to be like militaristic about it. But nowadays, modern parkour, at least here in the States, we don't really use the word free running. That might differ depending on your specific region, but most parkour people just say it's all parkour, flips included.
Okay. This is Run a Profitable Gym. And if you're a gym owner listening to this and you're saying, okay, I don't run a parkour gym, or I'm not really super interested in learning parkour myself, I'm going to tell you why you should be listening to this. Because Jimmy and other parkour gyms do millions of dollars in revenue every single year. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty of that. Jimmy's actually a mentor for Motion Mentors, and he works to help other parkour gyms grow their business. Jimmy, before we get into like the nuts and bolts of what is a parkour gym, can you just differentiate parkour from ninja gyms, which they seem to be kind of the Disneyfied version of parkour maybe, or maybe I'm wrong, but they're cropping up in a lot of cities around North America, especially.
Yeah, so it kind of goes down to the fundamental difference between parkour and ninja warrior training. Parkour, if you look at it as an umbrella term, it can refer to really any discipline involving how you move your body and move through space. So like if you want to get really technical, like dance or even swimming, like could be parkour, arguably. But really, like it's climbing over walls, moving through space efficiently and with speed. But Ninja Warrior is within parkour, but Ninja Warrior itself cannot fully define what parkour is, because Ninja Warrior, when you zoom into it, it's very niche obstacles that are, man-made, and by that I mean specifically designed for the sport. So if you go outside and train parkour, you're not going to find like giant inflatable bungees or spinning things you have to grab onto, or else you fall into like water. That would be probably a way more fun designed city, but just not not how humans do it. And that's why like they're different fundamentally, philosophically. But then when you go into a parkour gym versus a Ninja Warrior gym, while still super fun, is typically a predetermined course that the athletes go through. They're predetermined obstacles and predetermined challenges. Whereas a parkour gym is much more of like a 360 open space. And although there are like set obstacles that, a parkour athlete might expect to see, like different shapes of blocks and bars and things, there's no one way to, overcome any of the obstacles. In fact, you can make up your own moves as you go. You can make up your own pathways as you go. So it's very freestyle and very free form.
What does the inside of a parkour gym look like? Paint us that picture.
Yeah. So if you walked into one of my parkour gyms, and they're called Freedom in Motion, we have 3 of them right now. You would walk into, it's almost like a 3-dimensional rock climbing course. There's platforms,
Oh, wow.
There's stuff on the walls, there's bars to swing off of. There's a lot of movable objects. So some are like big, larger things that you would need multiple people to move around. And those are like big kind of cubular platforms. Other ones are, smaller. One person could move it. Just like trapezoidal, we call them vaulting blocks, and you can arrange them all however you want. If you're a coach, you can kind of customize your class for the day. and make whatever courses you want to. And then there's even like little smaller obstacles like ground level balancing rails to help new athletes just learn how to balance at all safely. And there's a lot of like care paid to what the beginner's experience would be, so there's a lot of approachable, a lot of easy, a lot of like DIY obstacle courses that you can create or a coach can create for you. It's any parkour athlete would know that parkour is much easier to show than it is to tell.
Yeah, we'll get some photos up here for the YouTube video for sure. And so if you're listening to this on a podcast, if you pop over to the Run a Profitable Gym YouTube channel, you can see some of these photos of Jimmy's gym, which is awesome. What made you want to open a gym instead of continuing to be a parkour coach or athlete, Jimmy?
Yeah, so I was originally a professional parkour athlete. I was on what was regarded at that time as like the American, team. There was a company called American Parkour. I was on their team. And while traveling around the country doing performance and things, when I was back at home, I had just a ton of private lesson students, and our community in Temecula, California, man, we had like 100+ people that were in network. If we threw an event, like 50+ people would show up, and that's a lot for, this is back in 2011 when no one knew about parkour. Even sooner, we started in 2007 actually. So at a certain point, I just had a bunch of students that I was teaching, and the first ever couple of parkour gyms had begun popping up around the world. The first one that I was aware of was in Seattle, Washington, and then a popular one popped up in LA. And I was 19 at the time, out of high school, and just wondering what I'm going to do with my life, and figured, well, I'm already doing this, so let's figure out how to start a parkour park or a parkour gym. And before actually landing on parkour gym, I approached the city of Temecula's mayor at the time. And keep in mind, I'm 19. So I had at the time I was 19, I had this like really adorable binder, like my school binder with printed out images of printed out images of like, this is what a parkour session looks like. This is my type up of what parkour is, just all on like at-home computer paper. And I showed it to our mayor at the time, and he looked through it. He humored me. And at the end of the meeting, he just looked at me and he's like, I don't know what this is. I've never heard of parkour. Sounds like a liability nightmare. The city will not have a public parkour park like a skate park, even though they exist in other parts of the country. And he just advised that I do it on my own in the private sector. So I went home and looked up, what the heck does private sector mean? Like, oh, it just means you open up your own gym. And off to the races. And maybe 2 years later, we opened our first gym in Murrieta, California in 2014.
That's cool. And that gym now does well over $1 million in revenue, right?
Yeah. So our whole network of gyms, we have 3 right now. Our goal for this year is to get to 3 million in revenue. So that's each individual gym. We're trying to get it to that 1 million mark. So they're just under that now, but we are on our way.
That's amazing. So Jimmy, a lot of people who listen to this podcast, as you know, they're around a third to half of that in a year for gross revenue. Let's start there. Like, why does the average gym owner need to pay attention to this? What are they missing that parkour gyms are doing really, really well?
Yeah. So one thing I want to point out is parkour gyms on average don't service the same target audience as like a CrossFit gym. Parkour gyms on average are working with kids, typically ages 12 to 13 or so. And the parents are really the person paying. Whereas a typical CrossFit gym, you're working directly with the adult athletes, whether or not you have a kids program. The kids program at the parkour gym, most of the time, is the bread and butter. So that's kind of the main thing to get. And I would say maybe on both sides of this equation, whether you're a CrossFit gym owner or, whatever fitness or parkour or anything working with kids, if you started as the athlete and you open the gym as the athlete, I've noticed that a lot of times the entrepreneur athlete doesn't take that transition from going from, I open this box because it's my passion, I open this box with my friends and I'm servicing my friends. There's seldom that transition from that starting point to, okay, I need to get out of the coach. I need to climb the value ladder. I need to learn how to actually run a team, how to actually make sales, the psychology of sales. Yeah, Chris is shaking his head big
I'm
time
laughing. Yeah,
on
it's
the
me.
video
It's
here.
me.
Yeah, and so making that transition from athlete to gym owner, and then from gym owner to like real entrepreneur, working on the business, building the teams underneath that, and getting to the higher rungs of the value ladder, um, time and time again, whether it's a parkour gym or not, that seems to be the fundamental key that needs to be dived in on, discussed. We need to figure out exactly where that business owner is, what rung are they on, maybe even stuck on, and how to get them methodically to the next rung and the next level.
Let's start there. So, one problem that I had was I thought that I was my own best client. Like the target demographic was me, forgetting that I was broke, noisy, messy, loud, like the worst customer that I could ever ask for. What do you suggest to somebody who's opening up any kind of gym? How do they get out of that mindset that they are their own best customer?
How do you get out of that mindset of they are your own best customer? Man, there's two ways that I see. The more painful and more common way is trial by fire. You show up, you build it, and you realize just because you built it, they don't come.
Yeah,
Um,
guilty.
that happened to me for sure. And there comes this point where, you're servicing people like you, you're servicing your friends, and eventually your friends, especially, let's say, they move on. 5 years passes, they move away, they start their family, just their lives change. And then you're kind of left with whoever's left over. And a lot of times those remaining people who fit that demographic just aren't paying your bills. Maybe they're showing up for open gym or drop in, or they're occasionally coming just for the community and the culture, but they're maybe paying like 20% if you're lucky of the total revenue you need just to keep the lights on. And so then there comes this sort of, come to Jesus moment of like, these other clients that I have, so my parkour gym, these parents with these kids, they are actually paying our bills. And me, the entrepreneur, I need to like pivot to servicing them. And I need to make them my focus and then provide a space around that for the community to come into and, to make it fulfill that need. But so that's the trial by fire. You fail, you realize it's not working, and then you discover how to pivot. And obviously the faster way is you get a mentor, someone who is in the space, who's seen this before, who can, discuss with you right here and now what challenges you're facing. And then they can just open up their plethora of experience and stories and just point out to you without the pain and the trial by fire, like, this is where you're going. This is where you could go. Here's the options I see for you. And they lay out a path.
When did you realize, hey, my target market is actually kids? It's not dudes like me in their 20s.
Yeah. When did I realize is different than when did I fully take that on as the truth,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, when did I realize? Pretty early on, maybe 2014, 2015, first year or two, we just started getting a lot of interest, a lot of parents coming in, and those are the people signing up. So it was pretty obvious for us pretty early on, but it wasn't until doing the seed client exercise, which I first heard from Mike McAllowitz, of just like, and for those of you who don't know, the seed client exercise in a nutshell is you take the top 10 people who are your best clients in terms of revenue, and then you write that down on a list. The next list, you take the top 10 people of clients who you just love working with the most. And a lot of times people will show up on both lists. They're paying you the most and you love working with them. And those are your seed clients. And if you really dive in and analyze that and you optimize your gym for those seed clients, you optimize for people who are paying you the most and who you love working with the most. And the really awesome flip side of that is the people who hardly pay you, or maybe who just like really don't work with your gym's culture. They're not weeded out. They're just like not planned for, and then they self-select out, and you end up with this really great product, this great experience, and something that for you as the business owner feels good and doesn't constantly burn you out.
Let's talk about how you made that transition, because I think a lot of people get that conceptually. Okay, my seed clients are youth or kids, but I've got this program for adults. Like, how did you make that transition yourself?
Yeah. So in the parkour gym, it kind of made the transition organically. we'd get 50 and then 100, then 150 different families coming with their kids. And it just was growing. So it was out of necessity that we add more teens classes here, more kids classes here, more like pre-K classes here. Eventually, some of those kids started getting incredibly talented. We've been open for a decade now. So now a lot of those kids are absolutely insane. If you watch them, it's really, really cool. So then we started adding competition teams. And, if you're just responsive and you pay attention, it becomes and it blossoms into the thing that it needs to be. And so then with the adult classes, kind of the same thing. The ones that stuck around, we kept a couple adult classes on the schedule. It's important to us at Freedom Motion to always have an open gym or two on the schedule a week for teens and adults, because me personally as the athlete, that's how I got started. Was I trained outside for 5+ years until we discovered that there was a local gym in town that had an open gym. And that was really awesome as like a weekly meeting spot for me and my friends at that time. So, keeping that on the schedule and keeping a couple of adult classes. And I know that at one of our locations, one of our female athletes has actually kind of wrangled in a lot of the different parents, a lot of the moms specifically. And now there's like a adult women's class that's just on the schedule now because those people showed up and there was interest. So, that side happens organically too. And it just unfolds that way.
Well, I don't think you're taking enough credit there, because when most people say I'm responsive, what they actually mean is they acknowledge like what their market is telling them. They don't actually pivot their product to get good product market fit, because that's hard. You actually did that though. You looked at like, well, here's what the market wants. They want more afternoon classes. Okay, well, I'm going to have to cancel an adult class. I think a lot of us resist that. So good on you, Jimmy. What I'd like to talk about now is like, what are the biggest problems that parkour gyms have? And I think a lot of listeners to this show will say, oh, well, even though I don't have a parkour gym, I have a CrossFit gym, or I have a strength and conditioning gym, or whatever. They're going to recognize that they have the same problems. And Jimmy is an amazing mentor. He's great at fixing these problems. And so hearing it from him might make a big difference to you. So Jimmy, let's start with like, what are the biggest problems that parkour gyms face?
Yeah. So at this point, through Motion Mentors, which is our mentor practice specifically for parkour businesses, we've worked with maybe like 10 plus gyms so far. We just got started, and every single time, the first issue has been pricing and the actual offer itself. So on pricing, every single time, every single person we work with, they do the whole classic look around the city. They're charging $80. They're charging $80. Okay, we'll charge $75. Mm-hmm. And while that seems logical, it's only based on this arbitrary assumption that their pricing model works, even though that other gym probably also just looked around the room and said everyone else is charging, $85. We'll charge $80. But if you start with an underpriced product, you really signal two things. One, to the audience, the parents coming in, that this is a budget class. This is a commodity. We're comparing this to soccer. We're comparing this to baseball. And the only thing that stands out here is that parkour is kind of cool. But if you can bring that up to be actually, no, we're not just like a commodity, park your kids here for an hour or so. We are a community of coaches who are deeply passionate about parkour, yes, but also the results that we're getting with our client. We're trying to teach people that they are people who can do hard things, that even though they walk in with this, preconceived notion of like, oh, this is too difficult, or I'm a klutz, or, I'm not as good as that guy over there or that girl over there, that we will bring you through lessons and through training to your highest level of athleticism and show you your potential. And if you can get a parent to realize that that is actually the product, that we, the coaches, are being mentors for your kids, and that through learning these life skills, they'll be sick at parkour, but they'll also do a lot better in school. That'll follow them through life with the increased confidence. And if you can really tell that to a parent through your marketing, through just what you convey, and through your actions and your words, you can charge way more for that. So if you compare the price model to like an occupational therapy clinic, they're charging like $400 an hour. And so if parkour is essentially doing that same thing physiologically and mentally, like why are we charging $80?
I
And
think
so when
that's,
you fix
yeah,
that,
it's great.
yeah, when you fix that, you signal a way higher value, you get better clients, you get parents who are more dedicated and more motivated, and they'll help their kids stick with it, which is vital. Yeah, and then on the other side of that, you as the business owner, like you finally actually have money to pay your coaches so that you can keep the best people around. You can actually grow your business, and if you don't have a drinking fountain, finally install one. Or if you hadn't bothered to build a front desk because this whole thing is bootstrapped, like you can finally build a desk that looks good and makes a proper first impression, which then just increases your sales. So this flywheel just comes out of nowhere once you just fix those fundamental pricing and offering issues.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And we see this in CrossFit, strength and conditioning, and fitness gyms all the time too. The pricing is so low that they hamstring themselves and they can't even deliver a good product because they can't afford to. So that's problem number one, Jimmy. And how do you usually address that with a gym? A gym comes in your program, their prices are half what they should be. How do you change that?
Yeah. So kind of depends on where they are at. A lot of times I'm actually taking this $80 number out of reality. That seems to be where a lot of hardcore gyms are, kind of anywhere from we charge 80 to $100 a month. My gyms are a lot more than that. And a couple other gyms that are successful and actually get incredible results with kids and families are a lot more than that, rightfully so. So if we take those prices that we have seen work, maybe compare them to like the city's median average family income. So that's one thing we can compare it to. Compare it to how much is your rent? Because, if you look at your profit and loss statement, you want to try to see like, according to my revenue, rent is maybe 15% of that or less. And if your rent is more than that, you're probably not charging enough. So like there's like a fixed line item that you can actually compare it to. That way it's a little bit more logical and a little less guessing. And there's a few other strategies that we'll look at, but from where they're at, we'll set out a game plan to, okay, let's get you from, here to, geez, if you're at 80, let's get you to 120. Even though that's more than the 15% like that you would typically advise someone to increase your prices by, when you're that low, you're only in the 80s, you have to do something now. If you do 15% every year, you're not even going to catch up until year 6.
Right.
And so from there, we have seen something really incredible happen. We'll work with our parkour gym owners to craft this, heartfelt, empathetic letter that goes out to the members that lays out, here's what's going on. We're increasing prices, but here are all the additional benefits that you're going to get and receive and immediately notice in the gym, like that drinking fountain that they were missing. Lay all that out. And then parkour business owners, it kind of reminds me of like yoga people, always have that really admirable soft spot of, okay, but half of my families I don't think can afford this. But a lot of times, this, Chris, they're self-projecting. It's because you can't afford it, because you're coming from a place of being broke,
Yep.
And so what we do is we have people offer that, hey, client, if this is a financial impact for you, if you cannot do this, we want to make sure that our program is accessible to you, the family, and the community. So we are raising prices. However, if you need to, we're going to let you lock in your rate if you prepay up to 6 months or up to a year. And then after that, then you jump up to the normal rate. And so that gives families time to stay at the normal rate, provided they prepay. But then they feel that change in increased value over the year. And then by the end of that year, they're there with you anyway. Mm. And so we just had a parkour gym do this. They only had like a small handful of people, less than my fingers, cancel. And a ton of other people opted into that 6 month, 1 year prepay, and they made 15K turning around. It was like 4 months of revenue for them. And they left all their clients stoked about it.
Yeah, and those clients are there for 6 months, et cetera, et cetera. Like it sounds like a great plan. So good, man. Okay, so problem number one, pricing. You've explained. Here's how we fix it in parkour gyms. What's the second biggest problem that you see in parkour gyms?
Yeah, so I mentioned the offer. I'll touch on that briefly.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit connected to the pricing structure, but there is definitely something after this. So on the offer, a lot of times, parkour parkour gym owners sometimes will just try to do way too many a la carte options. Like, oh, you want to come once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, 3.5 times a week, unlimited. They'll have all of those plus some weird complicating open gym yes or no factor.
Hang on. What's 3.5 times? Like you can park your car in the lot, but don't come inside.
So, I mean, that's half joking, but this is a little bit making fun of myself. I did have back when I first started, my cheapest option was like you can come twice, but if you don't want to come, both of those, just let us know and we'll remove it so it was just like kind of, we were just really trying to get members. So we were just being as flexible as possible to our own detriment.
Yep. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you. Keep going, man.
Sure. So we try to get parkour gym owners to do one or a few things, but at least do these two things. One is remove the unlimited option.
Okay. Because
if you have people especially because we work with kids, right? So if it's unlimited, you are now the daycare. And you have those families that just drop off their kid from when you open to when you end, 6 days a week. And if you look at the price per class that they attend, now that family is actually paying you like $4 a class. And then that child just feels like they live there, and the level of respect becomes a little bit hard to manage. It's a slippery slope. So I don't advise unlimited classes.
Got it.
And then the next one is just boil it down to 3 membership options. We like to do a once a week, a twice a week, and then a 3 or 4 times a week, your choice. And then there could be like a competition team membership after that, but that's not what you offer on day one, and then like specifically how you price those, especially the middle tier option. If you price the middle tier option a little bit closer to the highest tier option, kind of like when you go to the movies and you order a popcorn and they're like, oh, Mr. Cooper, it's only 50 cents if you want to upgrade to the large. And you're like, oh, okay, it's only 50 cents. Let's upgrade to the large. If you nail your pricing down, you can kind of have those same conditions to bump people up to the, coming more frequently times a week. So yeah, just those little strategic things we can help parkour gym owners work their way through.
That's cool, man. Do you want to give us one more example of like challenges that parkour gym faces? Because listening to these, I'm thinking this is verbatim what a fitness gym would face too.
Yeah, it's super similar. Okay, so if we look at, there's obviously, dealing with parkour curriculum that would be extremely specific to a parkour gym, and something that might be there would be if you look at your leveling system. So in martial arts, it's like white belt, yellow belt, it ends at black belt. In parkour, we're not wearing belts because you're going to get caught and it's going to be a bad time. So oftentimes we'll just say like level 1, level 2, and you'll get a wristband or something. But you want the kids to experience progression, and you want the kids to experience that they are like claiming ownership of the sport. And the sport is becoming theirs, so that then they stick with it. And so we've seen a few parkour gyms make level 1 just wicked hard for beginner students. You get a little 10-year-old in here who's like maybe a little overweight, maybe parkour is his first real sport. And some gyms are wanting him to, or wanting her to, climb all the way up on top of a wall from hanging, which is pretty brutal even for adults.
Wow.
Yeah. Or like do a move called a Kong vault, which is a fundamental move, but for a beginner, it's really complicated. So removing those gatekeeping moves from your curriculum, specifically so that your client journey just feels better, so that kids can rank up sooner, so that kids get that sense of ownership sooner. And it hugely increases your length of engagement. Just when you think about the psychology that's happening for these kids and for the parents who are watching their kids progress. And you can really affect that by removing those gatekeeping moves, is what we call them, and just placing them at more appropriate intervals on the client journey.
Well, if you think about how even video games work with kids, I mean, the first few levels are so quick that they're winning right off the bat. It makes a ton of sense that you want these kids to leave as quickly as possible with some kind of win.
Yeah. Yep. They need to win. They need to feel good. And then parkour becomes theirs. And then it's their journey. You no longer have to hold their hand. They show up motivated and they tell you what their goal is for the month. And as a coach, that's wicked awesome. But as a parent, Chris, that's the juice. If you signed your kid up for something and then they show up with their own goals, they got out of bed and got their socks on that morning and they showed up with their full personality as a parent, that's the juice. That's what you're paying for.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one reason I used to like coaching kids was most of the positive feedback came from the parents. They would say things like, I tell my kid this same thing, but they'll do it if it comes from Chris Cooper, or one parent even told me, like, you should charge more for the classes that you run in the evening because it gets my kid to bed on time. It's just, I'm not a good kids coach, but it is fun to do it once in a while. So Jimmy, tell us about Motion Mentors. Like, what's the need that Motion Mentors is serving? What's its place in the market? Why are you doing it?
Yeah. So Motion Mentors is our mentoring practice for parkour business owners. So not just parkour gyms, it could be outdoor coaching services. It could be someone with a podcast and they want to grow an audience and they want to, get sponsors. One of the parkour business owners in our network is business to government, which is really cool, trying to get parkour into schools, and they're seeing some great success with that. That's American Parkour. Give them a shout out. So that's super cool. And so Motion Mentors is trying to connect with those parkour business owners, those parkour entrepreneurs, and through them achieve our goal of having 1 million people learn parkour, but not just learn, how to vault and climb, like actually get that, what I just called a second ago, the juice, that personal passion and that transformative life experience of learning parkour and what that can now unlock for yourself mentally and physically. We're trying to give that to 1 million people. And from my parkour gyms, Freedom of Motion, like we can do that, but we have to have like 10,000 gyms to actually give that to 1 million people. And I'm going to try my best, Chris. But in addition to that, if we can empower other parkour businesses to run a profitable model that they feel good about, that actually has an impact on society and the clients that they're serving, that is a much faster and more inclusive path to growing the parkour industry and creating something here that is worth building a career out of.
What's really interesting, I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but if you can give a kid a sport like parkour, not only will they be better at every other sport for the rest of their lives, but now they've got something that they're passionate about that they could really do forever, right?
Yeah. Parkour is, I struggle to think of any other sport that is more of a athletic intelligence building sport that can be easily transferred to any other sport. Your proprioception, your ability to sense where you are in space, is vital and is constantly being challenged in parkour. If you fall, a whole segment of parkour called ukemi, the art of falling, if you fall, like parkour athletes just instantly know how to maneuver into a safe spot, land however is most optimal for where they are, roll if you can, and immediately get back up and continue down your obstacle course. And then that's filled with climbing, jumping, swinging, precision landings, so it's really transferable to anything else. So great off-season sport. And yeah, as you said, it's an individual sport. So when a kid shows up and they have their fears and they have their apprehensions, and after a couple of sessions with the coach, they become the kid who is doing those really cool jumps, flowing it right into some other vaults, flowing it into some flip that they eventually learn. And they have that, they are an incredible athlete. The kid does, that lives in their soul now. That sticks with you forever. And that confidence and that self-esteem, you show up to a job interview 20 years later, and you still have that you are a capable, creative, and just cool person, and you bring that into your relationships throughout the rest of your life. And so both of those things, athletic intelligence and those skills that you just gain from the juice of parkour, it's really something. And that's why I am so motivated to giving this to 1 million people, because that's what I got when I was 14. And that's why I'm on the call with you right now.
So amazing. So Jimmy and his partner, Christopher, are great mentors. If you have a parkour business at all, just go to motionmentors.com and he'll be happy to help you out. Jimmy, thanks so much for coming on, man. I think gym owners of any type of gym can learn a lot from the lessons that you've just shared here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm super stoked to talk with any parkour business owners or anyone who really, if you deal with kids, I can help. If you're listening to this and you're on Facebook, we have a group for parkour business owners. It's called Parkour Business Owners. So look that up. We're on Instagram too, Motion Mentors, and happy to help. Shoot me any free questions. I'll jump in there with you.
Thanks, Jimmy. This is Run a Profitable Gym. And no matter what kind of gym you have, if Two Brain can't help you, we can definitely refer you to a brilliant mentor like Jimmy, who has niche specific expertise and can help you grow really fast. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks, Chris.